probably agree on.
Yeah, the playoff team for sure.
So do you.
I mean, I tell you what, I don't think there was a more accurate state. And
if they struggle again, I mean, I don't think there's any way you can keep Alex Critch, but.
What's going on, y'all? Bud Elliott back here again with another episode of Summer School. That's our college ball preview series here on the Cover 3 podcast today. I'm talking Vanderbilt. I'm going to go to Vandy 247. My man, Robbie Weinstein. Welcome back to the show, dude.
Thanks for having me, bud. I'm looking forward to this season in particular. I mean, at this time of year, we're always like a little bored and want some football, but in the SEC this fall, it's going to be so much fun with the new teams and lots.
Last year was a tough year for Vanderbilt. 2-10 overall, 0-8 in conference. That, I mean, to me, there were times where it definitely could have gone better and then just like seemed to kind of fall apart in game. Like UNLV, obviously, when it felt like multiple quarterbacks got dinged up. My memory may be foggy there, but like they definitely kind of had some kind of pivotal plays go against them that made them go 2-10. Not that they were going to be awesome, but certainly maybe not 2-10 bad. Let's start with all of the coaching changes, and there are many. You dealer's choice, the most impactful ones in your mind, and how it's going to look.
The most impactful one will be offensive coordinator, simply because the scheme is changing a lot. So they fired Joey Lynch, who, I think last season they had some good offensive talent, and it just did not happen for them, basically. So the new scheme is going to be more. They brought in like Tim Beck from New Mexico State, and the scheme is going to have a lot of motion, more tight ends, more run based. It's going to be weird, honestly. Like, it's going to be different. They're going to try to win by differentiation, which Clark Lee said that they would try to do when he got here in 2020, and it didn't completely pan out that way. So to me, they're going from what was, a pretty typical pro spread type of offense the last 3 seasons to what now is going to be something really strange that's going to have some option elements. You're going to see potentially as many as 3 running backs in the backfield at times. They're going to play a lot of 2 tight end sets. It's probably, I think they would like to be probably 60 to 65% run. I don't know if they're going to be able to do that because they're going to be behind in some games in the SEC and you have to throw the ball, but they want to grind the clock down and shorten these games, which I think is a smart strategy for Vanderbilt. It's going to be interesting to see because are they going to have the offensive line or anything like that to be able to be as physical at the point of attack? But I do think it makes sense what they're doing. And so as such, with how much the scheme is just totally changing, the OC change is going to be the most significant, I think.
I love this. I mean, just like think about the places that run things that are somewhat similar to this. And because they're the New Mexico State games are on CBS Sports Network, we got to see them a lot. And on Cover 3, we talk a decent bit of CUSA, especially when they play those, Tuesday night, Wednesday night games. Like Liberty in that league has real NIL, and they put up 35 on Liberty. I mean, granted, like Liberty has Caden Salter and scored 49, but they really gave him hell for quite a while, and it looks like what Kansas runs in some ways at times. It looks like what Liberty runs, or what Coastal used to run under Chadwell. And just if you don't take the prep seriously as the opponent during the week, and you're just like, oh, it's same old sorry ass Vandy, excuse my language, you may give up enough wide open scores to where you get caught. Which, I mean, if you're at a school that resource wise is relative to the rest of the league is so under resourced, you kind of need to steal a game or two in conference and then get the right, non-conference schedule if you want to go. Anyway, I'm a fan of this, man. Like I don't think you can run the same race everybody else is running on offense. I mean, defense is kind of hard to moneyball defense, I guess, to a certain extent. But do they have the horses to run this on offense?
That's a good question. So the tough thing is that they hit the portal really hard for offensive linemen in the spring, and that's because during spring practice the offense looked really bad, honestly. But the thing is, they didn't have a lot of the guys, these incoming transfers enrolled. So Loic Fungi from Texas Tech could possibly be their number 1 receiver. He wasn't there. They're going to have 2 starting offensive linemen who are joining the team in June and we're not there for the spring. And then Diego Pavia, of course, who knows that offense really well. He was not enrolled yet. And so they had Nate Johnson, who's the transfer from Utah and can really run the ball. But he had some big inconsistencies in terms of decision-making. So it's a little bit hard to say because they're going to have like 5 new starters potentially who joined the team in June and who I did not get to see in spring ball. I think chances are they'll have the horses probably to be better on offense in the non-conference against, they're playing Georgia State and teams like that, and maybe lower level SEC teams. When you line up against Alabama and Texas, who are both on their schedule, I don't think scheme's going to save you there probably when the other team has a bunch of 5-star defensive linemen who are just going to blow everything up. I hate to be wishy-washy. I think it'll work to some extent, especially against their lower level opponents. But for them to be doing it against, good like 8, 9, 10 win SEC teams, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. Maybe if they are fortunate 2 or 3 years from now.
It's also a scheme that I think good players may stay at Vanderbilt longer in the scheme if you're finding a way to use sort of like undervalued like parts in the market, right? Like to where if it is more difficult for opposing teams to try to poach your roster, to envision how that player transitions from that scheme to the new scheme, right? Like that you may have a little bit less poaching or may just guys like, hey, I love how I fit into this offense, and so I'm going to stick around, which is obviously a good thing for Vanderbilt because like they had some real receiver talent and they just got totally poached. Which when I saw the changes, I was like, okay, this makes some sense because you don't necessarily have to have amazing receivers to run this. It would help, certainly. But I mean, Georgia took the one kid, and the guy went to Colorado. I don't know kind of what your opinion was on him, but a name at least, I guess.
Yeah, very talented, Will Shepherd. A lot of drops. So I think that was somewhat mutual, probably. There was some friction.
Understood there. And Pavia also has an SEC win under his belt.
He does. And Clark Lee has cited that game a whole bunch of times when talking about why he decided to go hire Tim Beck. I think he said that he watched that game 7 times from start to finish, trying to look for ways that maybe Vanderbilt, like originally just looking for ways that they could improve their offense. And then kind of like, oh, maybe I should just go hire this guy. And then as it turns out, Jerry Kill didn't want to be, he's coming toward the end of his career, and being a head coach is difficult, especially in this age. And he was ready to take on less responsibility, basically. And now he's coming, and they hired a bunch of their position coaches and took some transfers from New Mexico State too. So they sort of annexed Las Cruces, New Mexico. I don't know how it's going to go for them, but ironically, they do play Auburn again, like this season. So the Diego Pavia revenge game for Auburn is potentially going to be on the table.
How are Vandy's military appreciation days gear or their Mexican Heritage Day gear? Because Kill basically alternated between poncho and like full-on camo gear last year. It was kind of a running bit on the show that he wouldn't wear any New Mexico State gear. It was just all straight, either a poncho literally or camo.
They have like military appreciation uniforms that they wear once a year because the Fort Campbell is pretty close by. It's like an hour away up in Kentucky across the border. And so they do that once a year. So that'll be his opportunity. I think they're well stocked there. I don't know about the ponchos, down here in Nashville, probably less of that.
For sure. All right. Who's a guy that 7 weeks from now, when we are in Dallas this year for SEC Media Day, I don't know when this episode will be released, who's not going to get voted onto one of the all conference teams, but come postseason we'll have a pretty good shot to be on one?
I think Langston Patterson would be my pick. He's going to be the starting middle linebacker. And so if the name sounds familiar at all, his brother Kane Patterson was a 4-star recruit, was committed to Ohio State, ended up going to Clemson and transferred to Vandy. He's a rising junior, and he really should have been playing more the last 2 years, but Lee has been very loyal to like upperclassmen. That's been a common complaint from fans. And he still, I think, PFF rated him as Vanderbilt's second best defender. And to me, that passes the eye test. He had 70-something total tackles. He caused a good bit of disruption as well behind the line of scrimmage, has really good instincts and pretty good speed, honestly, which was a little bit of a knock on him, I think, coming out of high school, was how athletic really is he. But it looks good on the field, at least. I think probably because he has those great instincts and he's not wasting a lot of movement. Pretty good in coverage. And I think he's a guy who probably, especially when you're Vanderbilt and you don't have one of the better defensive lines in the SEC by any means, there's going to be more ball carriers getting through to the second level. And so I wouldn't be surprised at all if he has 100 plus total tackles and something like 10 to 12 tackles for loss, couple sacks, couple interceptions. Like, he's going to have the raw numbers, I think, to make all SEC. Whether he gets it or not, I don't know, because that'll depend some on team success and who else is in the mix. But I would expect that he's going to have good enough numbers to at least make a case by the end of the season.
What are the best position rooms on this team?
Yeah, linebacker would be the one. So not just Patterson, but Prince Colley, who was a 4-star recruit, transferred from Notre Dame. He did not play last season because he had a lingering concussion that just kind of wouldn't go away. And he was back on the field this spring. And actually, as the spring went on, initially he wasn't really doing a ton. And then by the end, he was one of their better defensive players and was definitely the most productive guy in the spring game. Randone Fontenette, who's a transfer from TCU, is a former 4-star who Vandy wanted out of high school. And he's going to play like a hybrid outside linebacker safety role. He looks pretty good. And they've got actually some depth as well at that position. Now, then, if you hear that as a fan, like a neutral fan who doesn't know that much about Vanderbilt, I think one of the big concerns is like, okay, great, you have good linebackers, like legitimate SEC linebackers, but that's just not the most important position. And their pass rush and corners have been big issues for years. And, that's going to kind of be the test of whether they take take a step forward, basically, with Clark Lee calling the defense now, is they got to get better. They got to get better pass rush, and they got to be better on the back end.
Will we see like a decidedly different style of defense, or just kind of Lee wants to, to kind of sink or swim on his own play calls?
So it's more the latter. They're going to stay with a 4-2-5. It's sort of one of those hybrid 4-2-5s where it's they're going to have a stand-up defensive end as the fourth guy at the line of scrimmage, and sometimes maybe they'll swap him out for just a regular defensive end, whatever you want to call it. But I think the scheme is going to stay the same, and the play calling the last couple of years was just really bad. Like, they were just giving up like 8-yard outs, 10-yard outs with no, totally uncontested. And there's a reason why you can go look at like, yards per pass attempt allowed over the last 2 years. I mean, they're toward the bottom of the FBS, and it's, despite bringing in a decent amount of very respectable recruits, especially at corner and to some extent safety, the player development wasn't really there. And I think the calls in game were really, really weak. A lot of slow developing blitzes that never really had a chance to get home. Not a lot of press coverage. And I get, you've got some inexperienced corners. I kind of get it, but they were just giving teams chunk gains basically with how they were playing. I think they're going to be substantially more aggressive, both in terms of the blitz calls and how they play out on the outside at corner.
What's a fall position battle that you're really going to have your eye on?
Oh, I'd say quarterback. I mean, I think personally that Pavia is going to be the starter, but Nate Johnson, I mean, that was kind of a flip for me. Like, I thought when they got Nate Johnson, even after Pavia committed, he's a preferred walk-on. So I thought that Nate Johnson was going to be the starter because I was told, got a pretty substantial NIL package. He is a really dynamic rushing threat, and he has all the potential in the world. I think his passing mechanics look pretty good, even if the end result isn't that great yet. He just didn't play very well in the spring. And my personal opinion is that since Tim Beck, is the OC, and Jerry Kill has a lot of sway in that program and a lot of influence right now, and is an offensive analyst, my prediction is that, probably Pavia is going to end up starting, but it's going to be a legitimate battle. I mean, if Johnson takes a huge step forward, his ceiling is way, way, way higher than Pavia's, without a doubt. And, Pavia probably played, even though New Mexico State didn't have good talent overall, probably compared to Conference USA, maybe there was less of a deficit in some ways than what Vanderbilt faces in the SEC, because that's a pretty big deficit, I would say. So I'm curious to see, does Pavia just seize that starting job right away? Or does it kind of go into the last week of fall camp, or is it the opposite? Because it's not a lock yet that Pavia is going to be the starter. I think that, he's going to get a little bit of a boost due to familiarity and comfort level with the coaches, but it's still up in the air.
I mean, clearly, knock on wood here, but if you've watched Pavia, like, not just highlights, like if you watch him every week, as I know you have, but if the audience at home is not, this guy plays like hair on fire, really reckless, and takes some ridiculous, unnecessary shots. So history says there's a pretty good shot they're going to need both guys, because he gets crushed, dude. yeah,
and I think they kind of they needed that infusion of toughness, probably to some extent. I mean, like you go to practice and they're just like coaching the guys harder. Honestly, the practices are more difficult. But in exchange, if you're the quarterback and you're trying to suplex linebackers after you throw a pick like you did at Auburn, there's a good chance you're going to get hurt when you're playing against much bigger defenders than in Conference USA.
I had a buddy who covered New Mexico State and UTEP because they're both kind of right there.
Yeah,
and he was like, dude, Kill just the stuff he says to these kids in practice and just like the way he yells at them for the entire 3 hours is insane. And then they come up and hug him afterwards. Like they kind of know it comes from in Las Cruces, like it's kind of the end of the college football earth, right? we're all here. Let's find a way to band it together and make it work, which at Vandy kind of is the same deal. Like the SEC or like guys, we got to find solutions here to get dubs. They're gonna have to find some solutions fast though, because I don't know who scheduled this. Probably would not have known when it was scheduled, but the Hokies come to town. That is in Vandy, right?
It is, yeah.
They're like the number 4 returning production team in the country. That's probably not the team I actually want to play to open up the year if I'm breaking in 20 new transfers and 4 or 5 or 6 potential new starters in June. But that is what is on the schedule. A little respite with Alcorn State and then Georgia State, which new staff turning over just an absolute ton of guys there. The SEC could have done these guys some more favors. Now, there's no Ole Miss, no Georgia, but can you get an Arkansas? Can you get a Mississippi State here?
Mississippi State or something? Yeah. No, they have a tough SEC schedule. I mean, it's going to be like you have to squint to even find more than maybe one, and even they're going to be underdogs in all 8 games. Maybe they'll pull off one. I don't know. But yeah, no, it's not ideal at all. Their home schedule is Alabama, Texas, Tennessee, and I think South Carolina, I'm pretty sure, is the 4th, which, okay, maybe they could win that one if they get a little bit fortunate. They've lost like 14 straight games or something to South Carolina, though. It's brutal. It really is. This is going to be fascinating to watch. I do wish the SC would have given them like a little bit better of a puncher's chance here, obviously. But we will be watching. Clearly, you have to be watching all of your coverage there on Vandy 247 because there are so many up for grabs position battles, and we'll be watching, man. I really appreciate the time. Yeah, thanks for having me, bud.
All right.